the Associate Dean for Information Resources in the Charleston School of Law. We have Jessica Whitman is the Director of Law Library and Associate Professor of Law at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And we also have Lourdes Slater, who is the founder and CEO of Curta Legal. So I am going to pass this over to you. I will monitor the chat for you. So however you want to handle questions, go ahead and let them know, but I'll be here monitoring the chat for you.
Great. Well, we are very excited to talk to you about process optimization. And I think for us, one of the first things we want to do is make sure to define process optimization as we start the conversation rolling. And so for us, we have defined it as a set of predetermined methods an organization or individual will use to identify and understand a current process.
So process optimization allows for identifying problems and areas for repair or enhancement in the ongoing process for better outcomes. And before we move on to the next slide, it would be our hope that all questions be saved to the very end. We have a lot to cover, and so we want to make sure that we save enough time at the end to answer everybody's questions. And you'll find during the presentation, it's going to be an engaging one, hopefully, as we'll be asking audience members for feedback. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
That's A-okay. All right. So basically, the problems and repairs and the improvements are then prioritized based on the need of the particular individual, organization, and our cases, it may be your institution. And then this priority list determines how and when the process optimization tools are actually applied in the process with the intent of creating a new measured process that is basically going to ensure the repetition of the expected positive outcomes. So that's always the goal, right? We want to be as efficient as possible.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Lourdes. I am a lawyer and a litigator by training. I don't claim to have any experience with higher education per se. I do have a lot of experience on process improvement methodologies. And the one that we are going to be discussing today, because it not only applies to manufacturing services, but it has been applied to many other fields and areas, including law practice. I use it to optimize legal processes of all kinds, is Lean Six Sigma. And Lean Six Sigma, if you probably have heard of Lean Six Sigma or Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is a combination of Lean methodology and Six Sigma methodology. Lean really focuses on looking at a process to eliminate the waste in that process. And waste is defined in Lean Six Sigma very specifically to include anything that does not add value to the client or to a process. And I think that is if there's one key aspect of Lean that I want to leave you with, is that it's all about adding value to the client by reducing waste. It's very simple. Six Sigma, on the other hand, is not so simple. It's really, it boils down to preventing defects. And the definition of Six Sigma is actually reducing defects to 3.4 units per million units, which is a very high standard. So Six Sigma needs to be applied in the manufacturing of cars, the manufacturing of drugs. There's a lot of areas that we need to make sure that there are no defects at all. For law practice and legal processes and improving all of administrative processes in legal departments, law firms, and we want to extend that for this discussion to higher education. Six Sigma comes in handy when you try to figure out how to minimize the defects, not with the goal of reducing them completely, because, for example, in a document review project of millions of documents, if you only get 3.4, documents produced that are not responsive, for example, out of a million, to be able to achieve that goal would cost too much for the gains that we have, right? So there are other methods that we use, such as, adding clawbacks, or other arrangements that we do, and we can add that to protective orders, et cetera. But using this Lean Six Sigma methodology is the combination of waste elimination and prevention of defects that I think really makes a huge difference in improving any processes. So we all talk about optimizing our processes and having better processes and being more efficient. But what Lean Six Sigma does, it gives you the principles and the tools so that we can all have a collective discussion where we can collaborate talking about improvement methodologies using the same lingo. So it is my hope and the hope of Carter Legal that Lean Six Sigma becomes kind of streamlined and widely adopted in legal from law schools up to legal departments and law firms, so that we can all try value, which is really one of our key ethical duties as lawyers.
So how does this apply to higher education? I know that Lourdes had just, finished talking about Lean Six Sigma and how it's been applied in other fields, but why should we care about it in higher education? And so I'll give you two main reasons. First, service process can be slow and therefore costly. And this leads to frequent error, and it negatively impacts customer satisfaction. Additionally, many service processes are complex and oftentimes have too much work in progress. So that leads to increased waiting time, which again is a non-value added cost. Now, the Pareto Principle, which Lourdes will go into a little bit later, applies well when working with slow processes. So 80% of the delay is caused by 20% of the activities in this model. And when you improve the speed of that critical 20%, it'll eventually lead to a reduction of 80% in cycle time.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, the goal about, or the purpose of discussing Lean Six Sigma as a discipline, for example, is so that we can talk about process using the same terminology and the same tools, because I think it's important that we can collaborate with each other and sort of understand what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. So here are 10 sort of key principles and tools that we use in Lean Six Sigma to sort of get us there. And I should back up 1 second, because if you know anything about the Lean Six Sigma process, you will probably have seen that there are different belts. So there is the Lean Six Sigma yellow belt, which is where you can gain really basic knowledge of what the terminology and the tools that we're going to talk about are all about, and how we can use them. There's the green belt certification, which really makes you capable of managing a project using process improvement methodologies in a more sort of, as the manager, as opposed to as the user or as a participant of your team. And then there's the black belt certification, which really includes a lot of the statistical modeling and analysis and charting that I don't think is totally necessary. I did it, some of my team members have done it, but it's really very much applicable to other processes and more complex processes, I should say. So for that, you need to study multiple regression analysis and various statistical tools and charts that I don't think are necessary for the purpose of what this group is talking about today. So I just wanted to mention that ahead of time, because a lot of people say, well, I'm not good at math, whatever, I'm not going to get certified, I don't even going to go there. And I don't think you need to, if you want to, of course, but I don't think a black belt is necessary to really be able to carry on a project and improve your internal processes. So a yellow belt would be great, green belt would be better, black belt, I would say, not necessary for most of your purposes. So what you will learn when you start studying Lean Six Sigma are a lot more than these tools, but these are the ones that I think and we thought would be most applicable and easier to understand and really can cause an impact right away. So the first one is the cross-functional team. And I think, Jessica, if you can just go through the charts. Yeah. So this is a key principle of Lean Six Sigma. It means that your department or you as an individual need to work together not only with your own team. So in law firms, for example, you may have paralegals that work independently from litigation support specialists. You have IT that does their own thing. You have lawyers that do their own thing. So the idea of having a cross-functional team is having people that talk to each other, because ultimately any institution or organization has a set of goals and a mission, and having people from all of the different parts of that organization that ultimately do work together, but a lot of times do not talk to each other. If they can get together to form a cross-functional team and sort of meet occasionally to talk about the mission and the goal, strategic planning, for example, should include the entire cross-functional team of entities that you think are important. So here, this is not applicable to law firms or legal departments, but other businesses. And it talks about how the customer experience, which would be the client-facing part of the company, the technology part of the company, the business part of the company, and the operation part of the company should really make an effort and understand that occasional meetings are important to talk about the main goals. So the second tool, I guess, that we wanted to address, and it's used a lot in, actually, we probably do this individually all the time without really understanding what we're doing. When we have a process, we try to map it out. And sometimes it's all in our heads or is part of a discussion in a meeting that people take notes and go and do their work. But what Lean Six Sigma tries to encourage is the discipline of writing down your process as it is right now, the current state of your process. So for example, if we are talking about, a document request comes in, how does your firm or organization handle that document request? Does it get logged into a particular system? Does it get assigned to a particular lawyer or department? What does that lawyer do? Does he or she talk to an associate to handle it? Or do they try to do it themselves? Do they involve IT? At what process? So you map out what you do now and actually do it in a paper, and then you map out what your ideal state would look like, which would include hopefully a reduction of time between the receipt of the document request and the actual production of the document to the requester. And then you try to create the better and improved version of your process. And it is really done in pen and paper. There are, of course, computer tools that you can use to map it out. But really, if you have a cross-functional team of people and you can get together once a quarter or once a month to talk about, different processes, and in a whiteboard or a big chalkboard, if you actually try to write this down, you will get input from other team members in type of brainstorming format that you will not otherwise be able to receive and sort of draft out. So value stream mapping or process mapping are very important concepts in Lean Six Sigma. Kaizen. So Kaizen really is, we talk about Kaizen events. Kaizen really means a get together and a meeting of the minds in this cross-functional team. So it's really a team meeting, but a very in-depth team meeting that typically tries to, for it to be really successful, you need to pick 1, 2, or 3 goals for this event, this big team meeting. Kaizen usually takes 3, 5, or 8 days, depending on what processes you want to tackle and how complex they are. But all of these different topics are discussed. How can we change for the better? What does efficiency mean? Does management need to improve? What are the tasks that we're giving the employees? Do the employees understand the tasks? Are they on board with how it is that we're doing it and with the strategy? So a lot of times they're not full day events, and they should be facilitated by a Lean Six Sigma Sensei or the green belt or black belt, and they should be managed, with a very strict, rigorous agenda, and whatever issues you need to discuss should be discussed in this sort of Kaizen format, which is a cross-functional team meeting where you try to tackle, 1 up to 5 different processes. All right. So rapid improvement event follow-up plan. You can print this, it's very hard to read here, but it also sort of touches upon the same concept. I think rapid improvement event is the same thing as a Kaizen event with an English name, but it kind of talks about what your event is, who is the stakeholder, who is going to be in charge of carrying on the task of making sure that this happens, which is the value stream champion, who's your facilitator, who are the different cross-functional team leaders, and you kind of write all of this out, and you then distribute this documentation amongst all of your team members, and you calendar all of this so that there's visibility and accountability. 2 things are very, very important in Lean Six Sigma, which is that the process needs to be visible to everyone, and that everyone needs to have accountability for their own part of that task. And I think this is a very interesting concept, and it's a very Japanese concept. So we have this idea of working as a team, and I'm most familiar with law firms, but it's kind of never taught to us, and it's sort of foreign to us, especially in law firm life. And I don't know whether this applies to other organizations, but it's something to really think about, because as a team we work better, and a lot of the times there's so much internal politics and competition in a law firm, for example, that we do not work as well as we should. So being familiar and being taught and embracing this Lean Six Sigma concept really makes you see your role as part of as an individual within a larger organization, and with the goal being that the larger organization and the larger team and the client will do better by working together. So it is, rapid improvement event and a Kaizen event are large team meetings, but they're more of a bonding experience than anything else. Every time I've led one of these, I always come out thinking that the team now understands what it is to be a team and what it is to be together. Because, like I said, it's not like 1 or a 2 hour, team to discuss a project or an agenda is a 3, 5, or 8 day sort of get together to talk about, how we really make a change. So the next tool or the next concept is this Dimac concept, which is really, if you Google Lean Six Sigma, Dimac comes out right away. It is really the crux of what we have been talking about here. And I think I'm going to go a little bit faster because I don't want to take up all of our time. But Dimac stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So when you do a process map, when you do a Kaizen event, when you do a rapid improvement event, when you write up the plan, the first thing you have to do is define the problem, whatever problem that is, whether you are still not paperless, whether you have acquired a document management system or a document review system that nobody's working, etc. You measure the problem, so you quantify, how many people are not using this. You identify the cause of the problem, why. You implement and verify the solution. It could be training, it could be, switching to another system, going back to what you had before that was working and should have never been changed, whatever it is. So you try to improve the current problem. And then you have to create a plan to control and maintain the solution. And that's also a very key component of Lean Six Sigma. It's not once and you're done. Is always is continuous improvement is really what you're striving for. Is always trying to improve and make a process more and more efficient. Root cause analysis is another way to, I guess if you go to the next slide, it'll be easier to understand root cause analysis. Okay, so root cause analysis is part of sort of identifying the root cause of the problem that you have defined. And all of these are different tools that you can use to do that analysis. The 5 whys, which I think we have a chart here, it's kind of a very simple brainstorming session that actually works quite well, and it's played with children all the time. So you have to, they say 5 times, sometimes it's even more, but to identify the root cause of the problem, you keep asking why, and why. So for example, the problem that I mentioned before, IT, mistake number 1, IT just told us to use X. That means that this was not a project that included the cross-functional team, because if it had, then it wouldn't be, your problem wouldn't be IT, it would be we decided to use this, right? So the main problem in this thing is IT did this. And sometimes there are many different root causes. But anyway, it kind of goes like that. IT told us to do this. We don't want to do it. Why? It's too complicated. Why? Because, it has too many different bells and whistles, and what we were using before was fine. So if that's the case, why did it make a change? Again, because IT thought X, Y, and Z. Why did IT think this was bad? And you just go on and on and on until you really get to the root cause of the problem. And it really may be the user has no time to learn something, the user has not received training, the platform that was selected actually does not help, but you have to sort of go through that process to really identify the problem. If there is blame to be distributed, be able to discuss it so it doesn't happen again, etc. So it's a very easy tool to use in brainstorming sessions. This is I love this one. So this is the Pareto Principle that Jessica was talking about. And it applies to many, many things, but basically it goes down to, and Pareto was some Italian scientist, that 20% of effort produces 80% of the results, or, 20% of your marketing efforts is what gives you 80% of results. So identifying what that 20%, that golden ticket is very important, because then you can be more productive. And this also applies to teams, actually. So sometimes there is one particular person in the team that, is not happy, and you spend 80% of your time trying to please that 20% or that one person in your team. And that's not productive. So being able to see the big picture and see what is causing issues and why, and then divert from there is very important. So it's another principle that will help you focus on what's the most productive use of your time and what is the most, what the return on investment is of, some of your tools, and spend time training and getting better on those rather than wasting effort and time doing something that will not produce results. All right, so this is like another thing that is used in Lean Six Sigma quite a bit is a Kanban board. It really means just Post-its, what you have to do, what you're doing, and what's done. And you have this in a conference room so everyone can see what things, again, it goes back to visibility. Everyone can see where you are and who's responsible for what. A project charter, this goes more to legal project management or project management in general. It is actually having everything written out, including the timeline, the scope, the members, and having a document that lays this all out for you.
Sorry about that. So with higher education, really we know that there's both that operation side and that academic side. So sometimes that can be a challenge, right? To figure out what process should we be applying? What tool should we be applying? But we also need to remember that there are some processes that don't actually lend themselves well to process optimization at all. And so an example of this is when we first were dealing with the COVID-19 and higher education, they had to decide, do we stay open or do we close? That is not a good problem to figure out for process optimization because, right, your answer is either yes or no. What you would actually apply the process optimization tools to would be what are the steps and the things once you've decided yes or no. So those are best suited for it. So a good example of this would be, if once your school was deciding whether or not to reopen, or if you did reopen, a good problem would then be to figure out, okay, well, how do we choose to enforce masks at our institution? And so that's where you would start to apply these cross-functional teams and gather survey data and apply that to whichever tool you're using to get the best and most efficient outcome.
So we mentioned a few slides ago that higher education institutions, they focus on both the operations and the academics. So an example of a business case that impacts academics is, perhaps how your higher education institution handled grading during spring 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So while a faculty governance may be required for final decision-making, as it was in my school, this business case is actually a good example of how HEIs can build cross-functional teams across multiple departments. So you might have career services, registrar, admissions, et cetera, where the final proposal can then be delivered to the faculty governance. And then you would be able to generate a solution or solutions from surveys collected from student feedback and all of the other stakeholders that are part of this cross-functional team. So now we've quickly gone through, which business cases lend themselves to process optimization in both academics as well as the operation. And we've also talked about the importance of cross-functional teams across a higher education institution. Lourdes has, identified through many tools, that we need to go and see, like, once a project is selected, how do we identify goals, how do we create our cross-functional team, and how do we assess for which tools are going to be appropriate for the project. And so we have a number of, items here on this word cloud that could serve as good examples for how LSS could be applied in higher education. Lourdes, do you want to give us some examples?
Sure. I mean, any of these processes, like I mentioned before, and I'm just staring at food wastage in university cafeteria, just because I remember, and it still bugs me, how much food is wasted. So sometimes we do not, or the administration or the team that is in charge of doing any of these things, for example, figuring out how much food should be purchased, how long it has to remain out, who's in charge of doing that and making sure that every week or every day you check for, enrollment or expected people or students that will come to your cafeteria, because a lot of times these processes were set up a long time ago and they're never revisited, which is part of what this Lean Six Sigma principles are meant to address, this continuous process improvement. So always checking back on whether this is working. And for food wastage, for example, it would be great for whoever is in charge of, it could be the registrar's office, it could be finance, it could be, whoever handles food and drinks at the university, to do what in Lean Six Sigma is called a Gamba, which means a walk through the actual cafeteria during an entire day to observe how things are done. And that is really the first step for a lot of these processes within higher education and universities, I assume. There would be a lot to be gained from doing a Gamba, from doing collecting a few key members of those teams that pay for this, that are accountable for it, et cetera, to really look at it in person. It was a big thing in the manufacturing of cars in Japan and Ford Motor Company in the US. And I think it shows you a lot. I mean, even when you talk about computer systems downtime, to figure out whether there's written plans for when the system goes down, and whether people are told what this next steps or the plan, plan A, plan B, plan C are, having emergency plans, systems in place. But for people that actually are affected by any of these processes, to talk about it together in a cross-functional team. And I'm sure Katie and Jessica, you have specific examples. We don't have time to go through to dissect how one of these processes could really be improved, other than to say that a lot of times you need that Kaizen event or rapid improvement event to happen, and preferably in cases such as the food in a cafeteria, to be present during the day of, distribution, a weekday, maybe the day that you're the most busy or the day that you're the least busiest, because then you really know how to calibrate for that.
Sorry about that. So we actually have a couple of examples that we want to quickly go through. They're specifically targeted towards higher education. These are real life examples. So the first one is Miami University. Miami University police department had changed its fingerprint program from a paper-based process to an electronic process, which they say resources and money for the university. And so Lourdes, Katie, who would you select in your cross-functional team? What tools would you select, and why is it most appropriate?
So I'll jump in here real quick. I think, obviously you want your head of facilities likely there. You certainly would want your head of the police department involved in that cross-functional team. Depending on how large your campus is, there may be other stakeholders. If you have dorm rooms, that might be someone else that's involved in the process. I know that when I was at Florida, we would have actual camps, summer camps, and there was someone that was in charge of that. So kids being on campus. So I think all of those are some stakeholders that you might not necessarily, some you would think, I want them on the team, and others that you might not think about, but are going to be really important maybe during downtime. for the campus.
And Lourdes, what tools do you think, they would have selected, and why do you think it would have been the most appropriate?
Well, I think the tools that I can talk about are the tools that you would use to change this process to an electronic process. So you would first, have your cross-functional Kaizen event or rapid improvement event. During that time period, you would map out how it is that you're doing it now, and you would map out the ideal future state. And then as well, you would probably want to, make sure that the team that is involved has a project charter with their due dates, et cetera, that there is a place for everyone to get together and meet, that there is probably a visualization of the tasks, whatever they are, in a Kanban board where you can have the to-do list and who's in charge of that. And, that little sticky note can change from, to do to, I'm doing it and it's already done. So that's another tool that would be great. I think you would probably need to conduct some qualitative analysis on your electronic process that you've selected, the tool that you've selected, to make sure that it's working. So that is another sort of, you probably need some data mining and try to figure out how you make sure that everyone that has been fingerprinted and the tool is working. So there's a lot of these tools that you use as a team manager or as the champion. We call it a value stream champion, but as the champion of the process, there's a toolkit of things you can do. In this case, when you move from a paper-based process to an electronic process, you will have to continuously monitor the electronic process to make sure that it's working properly. So having a manager for that is also important. And then, having regular meetings after that electronic process has started to make sure that it's working properly.
So, Lourdes, you mentioned Kaizen, and so our next example, is from UNC, from the Echelon School of Pharmacy. So they ran 3 Kaizen events to improve workflow and customer service to patients and nurses. And so the results that came out of it were a refined workflow and improved employee and customer satisfaction. So I think that, because you had talked about Kaizen events, did you have anything more to say about, why Kaizen events are so successful in improving workflow and customer service, particularly in this scenario where you have lots of items in your inventory? I think that this was specifically around drug inventory for the pharmacy school. And do you think that Kaizen events work really well, could work really well in higher education settings, and why?
Actually, I think they would work better in higher education settings than at law firms or legal departments, because I think as even private universities, there is this sense of, working for the public, right? You're doing a public policy service. And I think Kaizen events work because, I mentioned before how the importance of team collaboration and feeling that you're working together as a team. I cannot tell you how many times people say, well, I'm doing this because such and such person told me to do it, but I'm not sure why I'm doing it. And I don't think it really should be done that way, but I'll never be able to make my point be heard. So I think Kaizen events work because they are much more than just an hour meeting. People have to dedicate time, which is a key component of any change management, and we tend to forget this. Any change management requires executive function, which is that part of the brain that requires time and effort. So a Kaizen event really puts the parameters around that, right? You will know that for 3 days, you will be working on this particular project to make it better. You will be working with a team of people, and your goal is to make a process better. And you're going to be presumably you block your time so that this can all happen, and your focus. And I think that's why Kaizen events are so effective. They create bonding within a team, people get to know each other, and you have blocked time out of your very busy lives to make something better. And that is, I think, the beauty of a Kaizen event.
Thank you, Lourdes. So I recognize that it's 2:40 and we only have a few minutes left. I was wondering if it's okay with the rest of the panelists, if we just moved past the last example that we had and we just moved to our very last one where we can go and do this together.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
All right, so this is a real life example. This is from Harriet Watt University, and I may have destroyed that name, so I apologize if I did. And so basically what their goal was is they wanted to improve efficiency and create a student-centric approach for greater student retention. And so we want to pose it to you, the few people here that are in the group. And I think, we've got a small group here, so feel free to unmute yourself and join the discussion. And so first off, we were wondering, is this a good problem for Lean Six Sigma? So again, the problem is they want to improve efficiency and create a student-centric approach for greater student retention. What do folks think?
So could you define so when you think student retention, you think admission, you think admissions, recruitment, and then all student affairs, student success. But I'm a faculty educational developer and people don't think about faculty. So that's what, so can we do that? I don't know. I mean, there's traditional units that are asked to solve this. And we were in a presentation where, is Gannon, who said, do we think about our custodial staff? So what do you think about that?
That's actually a perfect example of this, right? Because one of the things that's great with cross-functional teams is you think about all of those people and you have to, so say you're those different sectors, you think, what is their value to this? Are they adding to the conversation? Why haven't they been in the conversation before? So even that creation of that cross-functional team in the beginning starts this process of efficiency. Because who knows, maybe the faculty have a completely different perspective on this topic and would have wonderful things to add to the conversation and change the process. Maybe if the students were able to go to one sort of demo of a faculty class, it would change everything with regards to retention. You don't know. And so that's one thing that's really great with this. So yeah, I love the fact that you kind of thought a little bit outside the scope for who potentially could be there. So another question is, in which you actually kind of raised a little bit, is what's the goal of the institution with this? I mean, obviously it's student retention, so we're student-centric with it, but what anybody else think about what are some other possible goals with this? What's the end goal?
I mean, I guess you're talking about end goal. Are you meaning like end goal for the university, end goal for retention for specific, departments? I mean, I think it could be answers of different natures, right? And I think, Tammy, you've got a good point in there. Money, I think, right? When it comes down to it, most of, especially in our, in the States, it is a business, right? But if we're talking about it from, different positions of, retention for admissions is going to be a very different conversation than it is for retention for particular departments, right? So.
Yeah, and so again, that comes into this idea of if we've got that cross-functional team, they may have different goals attached to what is, this student retention idea, right? Because your admissions folks may be saying, hey, our goal is we want to keep them in and maybe use them to recruit more individuals. You've got your money folks saying, hey, we need to keep them in there from the financial point of view. We've got the folks, maybe the faculty or student services that might be hit there from that social justice that was brought up in the chat. Or even if we think about it from the student-centric side, maybe you have a really strong mission, right? And that's what someone else might use for potential student retention. And so I think, again, you got to start with that cross-functional teams a lot of times, and how you make that up, then you can figure out, let's figure out what the best goal is. What is the, what's the process that it's going to apply? And then, so that brings me to my last question. Again, I know we've only got maybe a minute and a half. So what process tools do y'all think maybe would work here?
I'm just going to jump in for 1 second, because of course, a Kaizen event would be great, the creation of the cross-functional team, et cetera. But I'm looking at a note here in our chat that talks about a dean of undergraduate education at Clemson that basically did all of this, maybe not knowing what he was doing as a Lean Six Sigma black belt, but he did this. And this goes to what Katie, you, Jessica, and I discussed at the beginning when we're talking about this conversation, which is the importance of the leadership. And I think we should really emphasize that point. You need to have leaders that are welcoming of this methodology, that are welcoming of everyone's participation. So it really starts from the top. And I guess the question that I will leave you with is, how do we make that happen within your own individual organizations? And sort of how do we make our leaders see or get upskilled in ways to improve their organizations by using these readily available tools, and packaging everything as a continuous process improvement project.
Is this a case where higher education is like the last to do this?
I know that law firms and legal departments are the last to do this. Law schools do not even talk about law schools are just starting to really even talk about legal project management and technology, for example. We are very, as a profession, from law school to partnership, we are way behind. And presumably, law schools are academia. So yes, I think it is. We're very traditional. We are rooted in tradition and in it's very hard to sort of think innovatively when you are in the university setting, in the law school setting, which is what I know. It's very hard to think very, to view it through a lens of innovation. I think because we are teaching things we know well because we've learned it a long time ago. So we're passing that on. But leaders and faculty members and all of us that are in those positions now, partners of law firms, we need to upskill our own tool set to be able to really make a difference in this new world of digital transformation.
And I would say, this is an area that Jessica and I write quite a bit on and have done a lot of research. And what we tend to see is it's going to come from that leadership. So it's going to be a dean who says this is going to roll out completely across campus, or it's going to be a department chair that says, you know what, I need this one major project done. So as we saw with the example from UNC, where with the pharmacy school said, hey, we've got a problem, we need to address it. And they happen to have those tools. So I think it is something that, hopefully people coming to this session and learning about the tools will get exposed to them and want to start to implement some of these things into their projects. And I know that I and Jessica are very open to any questions. I know we don't have a lot of time now, but you can feel free to reach out to us because our goal is to have this roll out more in higher education. We need more efficiency, I think. It'll make everyone happier and feel valued. And have a seat at the table.
So I believe, Jessica, I think we have run out of time. And so we wanted to post this last slide. As you can see, it's a number of the articles, that Katie and I have worked together, as well as Lourdes has, drafted, on, in her role as CEO and founder of Carta Legal. And so we like process optimization, and we hope that, you'd be able to go and, benefit from it in the same ways that, we are benefiting from it. And so if there are any questions, Jessica, how would we best accomplish that?
Are you talking to me, Jessica?
Yes, I am talking to you.
All right. I didn't realize it was you that was talking. So if you, what other presenters have been doing is dropping their contact information in the chat right there. And so those that are joining your session can reach out to you individually. I'm also guessing, because everybody will have access to these recordings afterwards, that maybe Jean is collecting contact information to go along with those as well. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you, everyone. You guys did a great job. Y'all have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.